people. Welcome back to Cancer and Comedy.com. This is the podcast where we look to offer healing with hope and humor to people who are facing adversity in their life. And today we're really privileged to have a person who has just a great deal to share. I was able to spend some time with her at a conference a couple of months ago. She has a tagline going from the front lines to the punchlines. What it is, she is a combat veteran in the United States Army, and she was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and she went through that experience and has some incredible stories to tell about that. And so she knows humor is not just a relief, it's a resource. And that she now leverages that into a career in as a stand-up comedian, as a noted keynote speaker, and as a person who offers business leaders and healthcare teams as being an advocate for wellness, as she helps people lead stronger, better lives and laugh more through life's toughest moments. Her name is Robin Phoenix Johnson. You can find her at H.E.A.L.A.R.I.O.U.S.org. Robin, welcome to our conversation.
Thanks, Brad. I am so feeling serendipitous about this podcast because, as you and I talked at the AATH conference, Association for Applied Therapeutic Humor, for those listening that don't know, my kind of segue into comedy and this healing aspect of comedy was because I was caregiving and living with my mother-in-law who was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. So it feels full circle to come on the podcast today. Thank you for having me.
Well, that is awesome. You know, I find that everybody has a story about cancer in some form or another, how it's impacted them either personally or a loved one or somebody they work with. And then if you kind of broaden out the metaphor, cancer is basically something that kind of eats you alive. It can be the physical disease of cancer, but it can be mental health issues. It can be all kinds of things that happen, adversity happen. And you've had your share of things happening in your life. And but one of the things that I just got to tell you, Robin, I've got basketball in the brain today. My team, the Indiana Pacers, are in the NBA Finals tonight, so I'm excited about that. But I was thinking, I heard a quote from a great basketball coach, so I wanted to run it by you kind of as our starting place for our conversation. Is a great basketball coach who died some years ago from cancer, and his name is Jim Valvano. And shortly before he died, he gave a talk, and he said basically this, that 3 things you need to do every day to have a full life. And one is to laugh. You should laugh every day. And number 2 is to think. You should spend some time thinking every day. And number 3 is you should have your emotions move to tears, either joy or sorrow. Laugh, think, cry. I just wonder, is there anything in your life the last day or few days or so that has moved you in any of those 3 ways that you might want to just share for a moment?
Oh, I laugh every day. But I feel like my job is to be on the hunt for the funny, like find the funny. I think there's a book or something out there called Hunt the Good Stuff. I like hunt the funny stuff. So I love to find just the absurdity in day-to-day life. One of the things that I do believe like that is relevant to that quote is comedy and tragedy belong together. If you look at the theater mask, they're always juxtapositioned with each other. And you have to, because I believe that in order for you to see the good, you have to understand the bad. In order to understand what light is, you have to know what dark is. And so without knowing the contrast or the complete opposite, you can't really fully experience that. And so, yeah, I think you got to know what pain and suffering feels like in order to feel laughter and joy and happiness.
Yeah. Well, I think that is so true. In fact, one of the symbols we use on Cancer and Comedy podcast is that mask, with the cancer, with the comedy and the tragedy, different sides of the same personality. And so I want to hear about your story a little bit. You've already shared for a moment about how cancer has impacted your life. And then you also spent some time in the military, in the Army, and you were in combat. And so I got a feeling somewhere along the line that there was some challenging circumstances that happened to you that were maybe pivotal to some mindset shifts for you that may lead you to where you're at now. So tell me about that. Was there some kind of moment in time where you experienced something kind of dark that you had to gain some perspective on that lead you where you're at now?
I don't think it was one specific moment, but I think that in the military, we use humor as a coping mechanism. This banter, you could watch MASH or Band of Brothers or any number of TV shows, films that are about the military culture, and you'll see there's a lot of just joking with each other, laughing in this because what else are you going to do when you're getting
Yeah.
mortar or you have to run a route and there's IEDs on the route? I mean, it's just one of the things that we do. So it's so integral to our culture. So I feel like as I grew in my rank and service, the challenge was that when I was more junior, it was fine to laugh and be funny, but as I got more senior, I felt it wasn't really welcome or accepted. So I started to not react or respond to something I thought was funny. I started to lose my sense of humor, if you will.
Okay.
My funny bone was atrophying. So when I decided to retire after 26 years, I thought, man, I really miss that. I really want that back. That's part of who I am. And for some reason, I thought that I wouldn't be taken seriously or that the gravity of the situation, it wasn't appropriate, which is such baloney.
Yeah.
Like it's.
Well, did you find some pressure in that as your role in leadership changed, that you felt some sense of, okay, now I have to change and my sense of humor has to be diminished, or what were some of the leadership lessons that you took here that you're now applying to what you do now?
Yeah, you don't have to be serious all the time. When you're leading people, they want you to be authentic, and you truly are authentic and vulnerable when you're being funny, when you're joking, when you allow fun or play into the workplace. That's really a big lesson for me. And then, creating a safe place to laugh is really important. And then not taking myself too seriously, being able to laugh at myself is also a really good way to do like a humility check to make sure that you haven't gotten too big for your britches. And there's probably a time where I would say I did get too big for my britches and I needed
Mm.
a little, a little attitude adjustment.
Okay. Well, tell me about that. Was there some situation where somebody who's under you, or some situation where somebody kind of said, okay, Robin, let's, just kind of zinged you or something like that, where it kind of brought you down a notch or two?
Yeah, I had said something that I thought was quite funny to a subordinate, and I say subordinate, but someone who I was supervising, and they didn't appreciate it, and so they reported it. That they were offended. It went all the way up the chain. I basically got my hand slapped for it, and then I was pretty defensive and upset about it, and didn't handle that very well at all. But after some mentoring, some time to process it, I realized, okay, I can see how that could have been taken out of context. I need to be humble and apologize and just move forward. I can't just wallow in my frustration. So that's probably the one that was the most memorable for me. It was also a turning point for me where I realized that the things that I say have a lot of power,
Okay.
and I need to use my talents for good, not just to get the laugh or to be funny, but to actually help people.
Yeah.
If what I'm saying is funny isn't really relevant, if it's not helping people feel better about their situation. And in this case, I wasn't helping someone feel better. It was just a snarky, kind of sarcastic remark, which is, and as you know, that's a really lazy form of comedy,
Yeah.
and it really isn't great.
Well, it sounded like you know, whether this was the case in this place or not, but when humor is demeaning or degrading or things like that, that's often not helpful and can be destructive to relationships. And I guess I'll just ask you: were you able, through the course of the were you able to restore the relationship with this person, or was this kind of a goner? Was that restored at
No,
all?
it was a goner.
Okay.
It was a
Listen.
goner, yeah, and I haven't, honestly, I haven't really thought about it too much since, but just kind of now, just being in a moment, like reflecting, I'm like, oh, maybe I could have handled that better. But again, these are lessons you learn.
Yeah.
If you're, we're always growing as leaders, and we make mistakes, and we have some regrets, and then I think the best thing is just to learn from them and not repeat the mistakes.
Well, you mentioned here something about humor can be used in all kinds of ways. It can be used as a weapon. It can be used in a demeaning way, or it can be used in enhancing and to educate and to just to lighten the mood in some cases. And it seems to me that's a little bit of what we talk about when we talk about therapeutic humor, humor that's applied
Mhm.
instead of it can be entertaining, but it's not just for entertainment purposes only. It has a
Right.
purpose here. So tell me how you started to get kind of a little bit more deeper, because I know you're pretty deep into the world of therapeutic humor and what that's all about. How did this begin to transition from you from, just having banter back and forth with the others, with the other soldiers or other situations you were in and just to relieve the tension? How did you kind of move from that towards eventually to some, deep dive into therapeutic humor?
Well, when I first started, I was just a comedian and I wasn't thinking about it much at all. But then when my mother-in-law got sick and actually my dad got sick as well, I started to joke around with them and then the doctors, the caregivers, other patients that were around them. And I found that I had this gift of making people who are in pain feel better just for a moment. And I like to joke around that my mother-in-law, she had fallen and she broke her femur, fractured her femur. So I called the paramedics. They came and they were like, "Hey, it's really going to hurt when we move her off the floor to the stretcher. So can you comfort her?" I said, "Absolutely. That's what I do best." Grabbed her hand. I said, "Kathy, thank you for trusting me. Everything's going to be okay." I squeezed her hand. I said, "But if I would have known how handsome these paramedics were, I would have pushed you down the steps a long time ago." And she laughed, and in that moment, like, I'd like to believe she was not thinking as much about her pain. And so at that moment, I had this, like, epiphany. I said, if I can help people who are struggling with illness, uh, I can help veterans in the same way with their
Yeah.
invisible wounds, with what they're going through mentally. Like, what can I do to help them? And that's when I went to AATH and said, "Can I do my second year capstone or project? I want to do a pilot at the VA Medical Center, and I want to take veterans, and I want to help them with their using cognitive behavior therapy or theory, and reframing their way they think." So, I had a veteran named Melvin, and he's legally blind, and he comes in and he's having a bad day, he's in a bad mood, and we write a joke to kind of help him see what's stressing him out through a different light. And the joke that Melvin and I wrote was, "My name is Melvin. I've been legally blind for 6 years. But this morning, my wife asked me if I'd seen her keys. Then she asked me, have I seen her glasses? Whoa. Then she asked me, do I look fat in this dress? Yep."
Oh my gosh. Well,
And
that is,
just that little joke writing exercise dissolved so much tension between he and his
yeah.
wife.
It also sounded like that was kind of an exercise, as you said. You said joke writing, which means it sounded like you and Melvin really sat down and kind of workshopped it, worked it out. What were the setups and what were the punchlines and so on, and that probably helped him to kind of process some stuff there as well. Remind before we get too far away from it, have you ever you're probably familiar with the comedian Tig Navarro? She's got a pretty funny story similar to what you told. Maybe you heard it, where the firefighters come in and had to carry her out, and she was talking about how good looking they were and everything, and that's just that came to my mind. But I'm interested in what you're working on here, Robin, is that this study of and this getting involved here with therapeutic humor, and especially in the veteran world, but has also led you to some pretty deep dive studies. You're involved with Stanford and West Point and some other think tank type of organizations. And so, what's been surprising about that? About getting involved with some people who really involved with kind of academic studies of this type of thing. That maybe that other people, especially particularly healthcare professionals, may not be in tune with.
I'm not a clinician. And so that held me back for a while, even though I went through the 3-year process to become a certified humor professional through the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor, which there's not very many of us. 3 years is no joke. I thought, well, goodness, I could have gotten another master's or a doctorate in this amount of time. But it was very valuable, and I would recommend it if you're truly passionate about therapeutic humor. But it's always been in the back of my mind, hey, I'm not a clinician. And so that held me back. The other was that some people see this as fluffy, feel good, like, okay, yeah, laughter is the best medicine.
Right,
No,
right,
it's not. We all know real medicine is the best medicine. But
sure.
so just trying to really for people to take it seriously, I think. But when I became a fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford, I had the privilege to teach in their medicine and humanities department, and Dr. Lynn complimented one of my sessions, which was hilarious. humor for improving empathy and patient care. And he said, that was great. You should be doing this for all medical universities all over. Like, the future doctors need this training, this education. I said, yeah, but don't you think I should get a PhD, or maybe I need an MD? And he's like, heavens no. He's like, you know what? He goes, this is Stanford. I could throw a stick and hit a doctor anywhere. What I don't have is a 26-year Army veteran with combat experience who's funny. He said,
Yeah.
lean into what makes you unique. And you are a subject matter expert. You know more than anybody I know about this subject. I mean, I've read every 507 studies that have been done. I can see, like, you in the background, you have all these books. I have books over here.
Right.
My nose is always in the books, doing the research, reading research and studies. And so all of a sudden I just had this epiphany, like, you know what? I do know a lot about this. And so, not for nothing, maybe I don't have the diploma on my wall that says that I'm a psychologist or a doctor, but I certainly can complement those traditional therapies they offer and be an added resource for those who, because at the end of the day, a lot of people who need mental health care are not going to go get it, but they'll go to a comedy
Yeah.
workshop.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's less intimidating. They're getting the tools they need without it. It's like when I give my kid their vegetable wrapped in cheese. It's like, or I shove the broccoli inside the mashed potatoes, and they don't
Yeah.
know they're eating the broccoli.
There you go.
So it's a little bit sneaky in some ways, but guess what? We're helping a lot
Hey,
of it.
it's real though. It's real though, and I
Yep.
agree with you. As one of those guys who went and got a doctoral degree,
Yeah.
I got the
Gotcha.
thing of I got the piece of paper on the wall, but it really doesn't have a lot to do with application. You need in my world, my doctorate is in ministry. It's good to have the academic studies, but if you don't apply it, you've really not done anything. All you've done is just kind of ivory tower it, is what we used to call it. And nothing really happens inside the ivory tower. You got to get out and be where the people are at. And that sometimes it's kind of messy and kind of crazy and a little bit ugly sometimes, but that's where all the fun is at. And that's where real therapy takes place. So let's learn a little bit more, though, about what you have done. And I think you've done a brilliant job of kind of taking some of this study that you've done, the think tank studies, and applied it to a process that I think can be really a practical, tangible application in people's lives. And you call that hilarious, your hilarious process, humor for health and so on. And spelled H.E.A.L.A.R.I.U.S. and it's hilarious.org. But tell us a little bit about hilarious. How'd you come up with that term, for one thing? And then tell us a bit about the hilarious process that you have.
Yeah, sadly, it actually came after the loss of another one of my comrades, a Army veteran, very good friend that took his life by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so frustrated because of course, no one saw it coming, or we would have intervened. And I guess when I was like thinking about it, I must have choked on something. And that triggered this thought process that if I'm choking on something, Brad, you're gonna know. Like, I'm gonna start to
Yeah,
cough.
right.
My body's gonna say, "Get that object out of the airway." It's gonna respond. And then if I can't clear it, I'm gonna give the international sign for choking, and someone's gonna give me the Heimlich, or I'm gonna administer the Heimlich to myself over a chair. I know the protocol and the procedure.
Yeah.
But if I was suffering from PTSD, you don't know, and we know that the number one cause of suicide is untreated depression. So you don't know that I'm choking. You don't know that I've
Right.
just got these negative thought patterns that are metaphorically choking me and my cognitive processes. And there's no international sign for choking where I can indicate to you that. I might tell you that I'm struggling, but it's a little bit different than everyone in the world knows, like, I'm
Yeah.
choking.
Right.
And then there's not a Heimlich maneuver. It's not as easy as you just going, okay, a couple compressions and the
Yeah.
object, flies across the room. It's not like that with mental health. And so I had this hypothesis uh, that laughter could be a Heimlich maneuver for the brain.
Okay.
Metaphorically, if we could disrupt those negative thought patterns, we could get enough air into the mental airways to allow someone to seek hope, to then not take self-harm or actions that are negative on themselves. And so That's what I've been studying at the Hoover Institution at Stanford, working with some folks at the medical university, working with other experts that are kind of interested in the neuroscience and the neuroplasticity of our brain. And so, yeah, I'm hoping to publish a book on it. So here soon, the next year, release the results of those studies and findings and share with the world how we can use humor as a superpower for our mental fitness and resilience.
Yeah, I think it's awesome how you have put a name on that for one thing, and given us some process how you've kind of designed it in such a way. And find this kind of really cool and kind of fascinating that you've kind of tracked at least three different categories that I'm aware of: mental health, physical health, and then the kind of a business track. Can you
Yes.
can you just touch on each of those here briefly here? Let's talk about the mental health one for a second. How do you see the Hilarious framework? You mentioned some of that, I believe, already, but go there just slightly deeper. What you feel like the mental health track, the Hilarious framework, can be helpful to there?
Well, it's essentially cognitive behavioral therapy. And again, I'm not giving therapy. I'm not a
Right.
clinician. I'm not treating patients, but I'm under the supervision of clinicians and leading, facilitating groups under their leadership. And because I'm funny and I can work with them to deliver this really compelling, fun engagement, but basically training people how to see um, their problems and stressors differently and to challenge assumptions about those, to see the absurdity but see it in a way that you can chuckle at it. If I'm driving down the interstate and a Prius cuts me off, I can be mad, or I can go, oh, look at that, there's a smart car and they're probably drinking their smart water and
Yeah.
on their smartphone and they're still driving like they're stupid.
Right.
I'm making a choice, a deliberate choice to see the funny in it. So that's the mental fitness side. For the health side, that was more designed for healthcare professionals
Okay.
to allow them to find a better way to connect with patients and to bring more empathy into their care. Think of like Patch Adams,
Yeah.
more of those types of skills.
And
Yes,
this, I
more
know there,
bedside manner.
and there's actual studies and whatnot about the actual physiological impacts of laughter and things upon your cortisol
Yes,
and all that type of thing as well. And I think, but it seems like you've developed a protocol or kind of a methodology or framework, as it will, to help put some language to that and help apply that to people who may not
yes,
have understood that before, and that's good. And then I was interested. You do the business thing, and you see, is this how? Help me out here, Robin. How can something humor therapy help businesses? Whose focus is, profit, the bottom line, or productivity, whatever it is. Is this a real thing, or is this, I don't know, just something, some
absolutely,
fad or something?
absolutely. Yeah, I would say the number one reason to consider training your team in comedy, whether it's improv, stand up, or just storytelling at large, is because it requires you to tap into a creative center that we often shove to the side and not use. And our world, I'm not going to get political here, but it's very complex and volatile,
Yes.
uncertain, ambiguous. We need leaders who are adaptive and who are smart. And if we're going to compete on a just look at geopolitically what's happening. If
Yeah.
we are going to continue to be a first world nation that's thriving, we need the generation of leaders that are coming up now to have the ability to think and solve complex problems. I mean, really big things that we probably like we've never seen before. In order to do that, they can't continue to think the way they're thinking now.
Right.
They can't continue to define problems and solve problems and with their old models. They have to think outside of the box. They have to flip the problem on its head and find innovative solutions. And in order to do that, if they use the same things that comedians do to write jokes, what makes a joke funny? If you reverse engineer jokes that some of your favorite comedians have written, and you take that process and you apply it, that framework to a problem set for your business, you'll come up with some pretty creative solutions that maybe would have never even been brought to light. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
so
word
yeah,
comes.
that's the one. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just say a word come to my mind here in terms of all three of these tracks we're on, but particularly the business one, perhaps, is comedians, in my observation, and I've tried my hand at it a few times. You're a professional at it, and just impressive. I've heard you speak and just impressive stuff there. But the word that comes to my mind here, Rob, and see what you think, is nimble. You got to be
Mhm.
reaction nimble. A comedian has to kind of to think fast and think clearly and react, and you cannot be overly impacted or intimidated or put it back on your heels too much by something. You got to take it and turn around. And humorists oftentimes can take it and turn around in a humorous way that still has a message. Does that resonate with you at all about how that can apply to these applications we've been talking about?
Yeah, mental agility is extremely important.
Mental agility,
I
right?
learned that a lot in the military because we are in changing environments. Especially in combat, the situation can change at a moment's notice, and so you have to be able to respond and refocus and shift priorities very quickly, and at a very young age, mind you. I mean, I was
Yeah.
leading soldiers in combat in my mid 20s,
Wow.
and that's not before I even had my own children. So I was a pretty young leader. Let's see, I was commanding a company of 250 people, and that was I had soldiers in Afghanistan in 2002. So I'm trying to think about how old I was, but I mean, early 20, like I was
Right.
24, 25 years old leading soldiers in combat. So very young. Um, and so, yeah, we have to be able to do that. Uh, Helps us to
Yes.
get unstuck too.
Yeah.
If you're stuck in a certain line of thinking or you have some conscious or unconscious bias, it helps. And reading the room is really important because
Yeah. Right.
and this is really big now. And where when I do my consulting or speaking, especially smaller groups, when I'm working with them, it is so hard for the generations coming up to be present,
Mm.
physically present. They are so used to connecting on their phone, on devices, not personal in person contact. And improv and reading the room requires you to be very present in the moment. And that means listening and responding. So that's an art or skill that's so missing right now in the business world.
Yeah. I think
And
another goes kind of alignment with that. See what you think is focus. You shift
Mhm.
and then you got to focus. You got to shift your direction and focus and get something done. And I think we live in such a distracted and distracting world right now. That is a challenge for people to do. And so it seems like you gained some great insights in this unique set of experiences that you've had. You talked about your mom and your experiences with your mom and your dad, and you've talked about your combat experiences. And indeed, it seems to me that if you got whatever's happening in combat, whether it's bombs or bullets or
Yeah.
helicopters or whatever, that would not only get your attention right away, but you've got to, if there are literally life and death stakes on the
Yeah.
line if you
Yeah.
mess up, and so that would get your focus as well. And you're applying these to people's lives. So what maybe are some misconception or some unseen thing that people who now you when you go to an audience or whatever that they may not get about this whole thing about therapeutic humor? What are some misconceptions you think people may have about it?
Well, that reminds me that one of the reasons I started doing comedy was because of the narrative of the veteran. There's a lot of misconceptions that we were all
Okay.
broken
Yeah.
and and troubled and suicidal. And I thought that's not the story. That's not my story. I mean, I've had my share of challenges, mental health and otherwise, but my story is largely positive. And I feel like the 2% of experiences that I had in the military that were negative or sad or depressing should not be the story. What about the other 98% of really funny stories about my service?
Right.
I mean, those are the ones I want to talk about. But when you see about humor, misconceptions are that it's just light and fluffy, that it's not evidence based, which is hardly from the truth. It's very evidence based. It's effective. I think the biggest thing I would love to see is, obviously covered by insurance as part of
Mm. Okay.
the recognized complement, treatment. I mean, there's yoga, there's mindfulness training, meditation, there's all types of other treatments, and they're welcome. I mean, they do canine and equine assisted therapy, recreational therapy, all these things. But yet humor is still kind of being left out of the cool kids group. And really find that discouraging when it's so effective and there's so many studies and research behind it. And people want it now more than ever. They will go and they will participate. Our group at the medical center, we're the most well attended group of all of the
Mm.
therapeutic that they offer because
What?
the vets love it. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm learning how to write for SNL. I'm having fun. I'm learning the art of a joke. I'm learning joke structure." Now, mind you, we're not training them to become comedians. There's great organizations like Art
This is
Services Art Partnership that teaches that
right.
stuff.
This is
We're
kind of
teaching
part of the therapy for them personally. Is that right? What's going on here?
it's more joke writing and again, it's like reframing your mind through I'm basically asking the participants, think like a comedian.
Yeah.
If you were a comedian writing a bit about what's going on in your life that's upsetting you, what would you write about it? I mean, and some of it's dark humor. I mean, I had a veteran who attempted
Indeed.
to kill himself and he shot himself in the chin. The bullet ricocheted off his dental work, exited out his cheek, and he survived.
Mm.
And he asked me to come to the hospital. He said, "Don't feel sorry for me. You know, I don't want any sympathy, but I do want you to make me laugh." And so I went in there and he had said he was a Marine. And I was like, "Hey, I'm going to need to see your paperwork because you said you're a Marine. You were a Marine, but you missed. So where are you?" Like, "Hmm." And he just
Yeah.
started cracking up. He thought that
Yeah.
was funny as heck.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's only the gallows dark humor that we can do, like veteran to veteran, but it
Yeah.
works.
I love that. I love that. One of the things I've heard you say is that in many ways, humor is a superpower. And this is going to
Yeah.
change in the narrative. Humor is a superpower, especially for things like empathy, making personal connection, kind of this, we're in the same club here with the veterans and so on, and care. So tell you maybe even things about dealing with compassion fatigue that some people have, burnout, things like that. Say a word about that, about humor as a superpower. How have you seen that manifested?
Sure. I came up with that. I don't remember what I was doing when I thought about that. I was trying to figure out a way to share with people that it's really a tool in your kit bag. We
Okay.
read all these books about leadership traits and this and that. I'm like, no, if you have a great sense of humor, you just become more resilient, more authentic, more connected to those around you, um, more likely to actually see opportunities versus focusing on the setbacks and the negative aspects of your day or your work. So yeah, I think if people just let themselves use it, but there's a fear right now of cancel culture of
Oh, yeah.
offending someone.
Yeah.
And so some people are like, "Oh, I'm not going to be taken seriously if I'm funny, or I may offend somebody, so I don't want to say anything because I'm not going to end up at HR."
Yeah.
So I do some education on that as well,
Yeah.
on how to
Uh,
navigate
uh, you know,
work culture.
yeah, we live in touchy times. and,
Yeah.
and, and yet, I think there is a place for respecting boundaries, there are certain lines that probably shouldn't be crossed for certain
Mhm.
folks. And yet we need the sensitivity level needs to, as you mentioned earlier, about there are some people who take themselves so seriously, but really don't see the ramifications of their actions, as seriously. And then other people who I believe often do not take themselves too seriously, but do take their actions seriously in terms of the implications of, what they do, whether it's policy or culture or things like that. And I think what you're doing here is sharing some great things that help people to take where they're at and kind of rise up from it. And that leads me to one of the last things I really want to know about you, Robin, is your name is Robin Phoenix Johnson. And I think I get a little bit of that. Robin Johnson's probably a pretty common name. My name is actually, I go by Brad, but my name is Robert Miller, which is extremely common. But I don't. Is Phoenix your given name, or is that a nickname? If so, tell me the story of Phoenix.
Yeah. Phoenix is a nickname. It was a stage name. When I first started comedy, I somehow had this misconception that I could protect my privacy by having a stage name, which is not true. People are
All
going to find
right.
out who you are. It's very hard to stay private. So I just thought the Phoenix was rising from the ashes. I was ending a chapter of my military career, and I felt that I was a phoenix rising from the ashes of that experience. Not that it was a terrible experience, but I just felt very strong and confident, and I didn't feel like a butterfly. I felt like a phoenix, you know.
So, as a butterfly might be slowly emerging from the cocoon, phoenix is bursting forth from the ashes, and
Yes, that's how I felt.
I love
That's
that
how I felt.
that imagery, and it's a powerful imagery, of course. And so, let's just take it and kind of bring us around to this here, and that
Okay.
is, tell me about a person that you know that you part of what you did had some impact on it. Maybe it was a comedy show, or maybe it was a particular joke, maybe one of the workshops that you do, but a person who either came up to you or you knew the story where something that was involved with something you were involved with made an impact and was life changing for them. Tell me a story.
All right. Well, I kind of already shared about Melvin, and then
Yeah.
my friend that was in the hospital that shot himself out, and my mother-in-law as well. I think maybe some of the medical providers that were caregivers for my mother-in-law, like, you think you're just making the patient laugh, but you don't realize that they're also listening.
Right.
And there was a nurse that was going through a divorce, and she's had a lot going on, but she's pretty quiet. But she would listen to me do my jokes and stuff, and she pulled me to the side and said, I love when you come in here. Like, it makes my day because I just need to laugh.
Well, that is
So
awesome.
it made me feel very Patch Adams esque. So it's one.
That's a good.
There's so many times. It's actually a really good feeling. You know this because you are in ministry, and it's just such a good feeling. Sometimes you don't know that it happened, and
Right.
then you fast
Right.
forward. I went to an event. I was speaking in Boston on Tuesday, and there was a woman there who had saw me speak at another event, and she had drove an hour and a half to come see me in Boston because she said, "You made me feel so much joy and happiness when I saw you the first time." Like, and she brought her husband this time. She's like, "I had to bring my husband to see you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So those moments are great. I wish my kids felt like that.
Oh,
Like
well,
this.
that's a whole different story. Your worst audience is always your kids. So,
Yeah, look.
in my family, I'm kind of known as the dad joke guy, and the only people who don't get it is my kids, of course. But there you go.
Oh,
Well, what a joy. Well, any final words of encouragement to anyone out there who may be needing a little hilarious-ness in their life? Any final words of encouragement, or any words of to share with our folks here in our cancer comedy audience before we say goodbye?
yeah, I like this quote from Desmond Tutu, who was a
Yeah.
Nobel Peace Laureate, and he said, "We have to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in." And I like sharing that because I think that a lot of what we do in an effort to help people is reactive. It's, people fall in the river and you say, "Oh, don't feel embarrassed that you fell in the river. A lot of people fall in the river. It's okay." Or, "Don't worry, I've got a floaty. Let me throw it to you." I feel like what this does, what humor is doing, is it's preventing you from falling in the first place.
Uh,
It's keeping you away from the edge of the riverbank. It's giving you some emotional distance from the sadness and the depression and the anger. Not that those emotions are terrible. Like, we're supposed to have those emotions,
right.
but they shouldn't be causing us to want to take self harm action. So that's what I would just say is it's preventative. Just it's a tool, a resource. It's um again, like a muscle that needs to be worked out so it doesn't atrophy. And if you let it go too long and you lose your sense of humor, well, you're very close then to probably losing your footing on the edge of the riverbank.
Absolutely. What a great way for us to end our conversation. In fact, just locally, just at I happen to work with an organization called Upstream of Prevention, which has to do with mental health
Oh,
issues.
I love
Based on
that.
and the quote, this quote is kind of the founding part of
I
that.
love
So
that. I didn't know
that,
that.
yeah, Upstream Prevention is what it's called. But it's certainly a delight to have you with us and to tell us, Robin, if people want to learn more about you, about your career as a stand-up comedian, or anything else you're involved with, tell us how people can find out more about you.
Yes. Well, I have a robinphoenixjohnson.com website. That's the easiest way. And then if they want more about H.E.A.L.A.R.I.O.U.S, like you said, H.E.A.L.A.R.I.O.U.S.org. So those two websites are the best. And I'm a big LinkedIn fan. So if they want to find me on LinkedIn under Robin Phoenix Johnson, they'll find me there.
Awesome. Well, our guest today, Robin Phoenix Johnson from H.E.A.L.A.R.I.O.U.S.org and a few other things as well. I encourage you to find out more about her. We'll put all the links that she mentioned in our show notes at cancerandcomedy.com. Robin, thanks for being our guest today on Cancer and Comedy.
Thank you. I'm going to do one short plug for people to join us at Humor Camp at the National Comedy Center in Jamestown, New York, October 9th through 11th. Little shameless plug there. It's going to be awesome. I'm one of the camp leaders. So if you want to explore humor a little bit more, join us in Jamestown, New York. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but I promise you we'll have a good time.
Awesome. We'll put notes about that in our show notes as well. Thank you, Robin.